Welcome to the Liberation Lab podcast, insights and interviews for the disruptive educator. I'm honored to have my brother on. I'm going to let him introduce himself. So, why don't you tell the people who you are, what you do, and why you do it?
My guy, my name is Daman Harris. Hello, family. I am the co-director of the Bond Project. The longer name is the Building Our Network of Diversity Project. We're a nonprofit out of Maryland that supports efforts to recruit and retain and develop educators of color, particularly men of color in education. I have a day job too, where I support professional learning in the central office in the Mid-Atlantic School District that um, I don't talk about often when I'm on these spaces.
100%. 100%. Uh, Brother, I'm honored to have you on. With it goes without saying, but for those who are listening, we are in the midst of a very interesting time in the
Yeah.
socio-political context.
Yeah.
Um, At the time of this recording, um, we've recently learned about the gutting of the Department of Education. Um, we've recently learned that while these folks are being laid off and all the things, we don't necessarily know about the programs that led to ensuring that children can eat,
Mhm.
therefore children can be in our schools functioning optimally, right? We don't necessarily know about um, the funding formulas as it pertains to schools who are more dependent. um, there's so much up in the air, but one thing we do know is that when it comes to the idea, the thought, even saying the word anti-racist, um Elon and them might be looking up this podcast right now to put us on a list.
I sure hope so,
uh
man. Like, come get out there. We can talk. We can talk, brother.
y-
Send me some of your folks. Let's talk. We can educate each other. I'd like to grow together.
yeah, that would be great, right?
Mhm.
um but the reason I bring that up is because of your phenomenal work. I'm gonna hold it up to the camera here. The anti-racist school leader, right? What to know, say, and do. I love that tagline, by the way.
All right.
um So as we start and preface our conversation, talk to me about the impetus for writing this book, and subsequent to that, now it's writing amidst this political backdrop from which it resides. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah. So the start was the writing with this book. So as a part of Bond's work, we create platforms for whatever our members say they want to do. So some guys said they needed a space to write. So we created a blog. Some guys needed a space to talk. So we created a podcast. Brothers said that they felt like we were some people were gatekeeping
Mm,
their efforts to present at national conferences and have a national presence. So we created our own
mm.
national conference. It's called the Bond Project, and it is April 26th through April 25th through 27th
27.
in
Yep.
this year at Bowie State University. So folks can find out about it at bondeducators.org. I know we'll talk more about that in the few.
100%. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but one of the other pieces that we did, brothers said that they wanted some support with writing. We wanted to figure out like how we could support each other. So we created a writer's room, and guys just got together and brought whatever it was they were working on, got feedback, shared their sort of obstacles that they were encountering. And we all talked together, the group that met regularly, and just shared ideas about how we could make each other's writing better. Right. You know, that old
Yeah.
adage, the iron sharpens iron piece. And as a part of that, like one brother was working on a screenplay. Another brother was working on a blog that he wanted to publish online. And I was working on sort of outlining this book and not quite sure where I was going with it at the time. And for those in your audience, family who might not know that publishers have acquisitions editors. And those folks' sole job is to search around for new talent. And because I was writing in different places and speaking in different places and hopping online like this in different spaces, one of them reached out to me and said, hey, saw what you wrote, said here, we think you might have a book or two in you. What do you think? I said,
Mm,
coincidentally, and I don't really believe in coincidences or luck, right? So I said,
mm,
but it just so happens that I'm working on the start of something right now. And what would you prefer me to write on? Because my mind was circling around supporting men of color in education and supporting, and then my school, I was an elementary school principal at the time. In my school,
mm,
we were talking about this, like making this turn towards anti-racism. I began talking with my assistant
mm.
principal. I've been talking with my boss at the time and sharing like what this could be. And the,
Yeah.
the editor, the publishing house, which it turned out to be Solution Tree, said you can pick. They both sound like viable
Mm,
topics. And so that's
mm,
what I chose to go that route because it was going to be the journey I was taking with my school. In a lot of ways, I've said this in other settings, in a lot of ways, this book is a love letter to my old school. Where that
mm,
community that I love, I'm not there anymore. I'm in a different capacity in a different school district now, but it is so gratifying when the book first came out to see some of my folks reach out, my old staff, and say, I saw that anecdote you listed in the book, you included in the book on page, so and so. I remember that conversation. That was you and me. We had that conversation. Like those types of
mm,
things are really cool,
mm.
cool to see. And how I got
Yeah.
on to like sharing our story and thinking about how other people can use it is, and then I'll shut up. Is
You
um,
good, brother?
we run around and talk to folks. You and I both. We run around talking to people all the time. And when I talk
Yeah.
to people about this work, folks often say, "I know there's an issue. I don't know what to do about it. Right? I don't know what first
Mm,
step to take. Like where should I go? What should I try? I'm not quite sure." And so that's
hmm
why this book ended up being, well, here's what you need to know, say, and do in order to move in that direction. And so it is, each chapter is written like it starts with a verb, each chapter title, because this is what you do, right? Each space along the way. And we'll get a chance to talk about it as we go along, I'm sure.
Yeah. So I think that it's um, you think about the power of words and language, and I want to dive. I want to look at it from two different angles here. The first is when we talk about just even the word anti-racist, anti-racism. So I will I will use a personal story to be able to share why I think this question is important. Um, after the racial, uh, I would have loved to say awakening, but maybe it was short lived. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
Uh, of of 2020, when folks wanted to become more knowledgeable about what they have now seen and can't unsee, there was a conversation at the school that I was serving at, and the conversation was with regard to what anti-racist meant, because the language that uh, Dr. Ibram X. Kendi put out made them feel, um, made folks feel, and these are my white counterparts, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the time, made them feel uncomfortable with notions of privilege and power. Made them feel uncomfortable with um, how the even doesn't give you an out in terms of saying you have to be actively working against these systems. And then there became a question of, well, what systems and what is at play here? And while there were good questions to ask to interrogate, what I found was, in my experience, the questions were asked as an escape from the responsibility to do something. So if I question everything, if I say that I'm unsure of what path to take, I don't have to necessarily make a move because I'm afraid of doing the wrong thing, and therefore I'm not going to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, if you could speak to that for a second for us, but then also in that kind of help those who are getting in touch with your genius for the first time, understand and unpack what anti-racism truly means.
Gotcha. Well, so that part for me is simple, and it is, anti-racism is any, it's sort of examining the context that you're in
Yeah.
and reviewing data that indicate disparate results or different disparate outcomes, right? Disproportionate outcomes, positively or negatively, for different groups of folks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes,
Mm-hmm.
the primary focus of schools is students. So we'll talk about the disparate impacts that different things may have or different outcomes that keep happening for different groups of students. But it also
Yeah.
could be with families, their caregivers, community members, because we serve a community. We don't just serve a couple of people in school
That's good.
buildings, in the school
Yeah.
business, right? It's also
Yeah.
our staff as well, right? There may be disproportionate negative or positive outcomes that happen. So anybody who is actually seeking those disproportionate outcomes and um, thinking through what systems, what practices that are in place that lead to
Mm-hmm.
those things, we're actually trying to deconstruct them, right, and rebuild them in some cases, abolish them in others. But
Yeah.
that is really what it is. It is, where's the problem with the disparate impact? Where's this, what's the system? What's the practices that are causing that thing? And let's go on that. Now, one of the things that we deal with, like you said, that temporary racial reckoning that we had a few years ago, was
Yeah.
folks were thinking like, all right, if why don't we just stop saying the word race or stop saying the word racist, and then right, we're good. And I was
Yep.
explaining to my staff that I shared with them an image and basically was like a line graph that didn't have
Yep.
any data on it. It just had the lines, 5 lines, one above the other, going across the graph. And the bottom axis, the x-axis, was year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4. And I said to
Okay.
my staff, if we treated this graph as positive outcomes, like graduation rates, if we had that hierarchy of lines, we'd be able to tell without me labeling that line, if there were racial or ethnic groups, which racial or ethnic groups were there in that line, in what
100%.
order, right? And if we
Yep.
flip that line graph to negative outcomes, dropout rates, suspensions, office referrals, you name it, now that those lines, those same 5 lines, are in a hierarchy. If they were racial or ethnic groups, I wouldn't have to tell you which one was represented by which racial or ethnic group was represented by which line, because we have a pretty good sense of that, and it's
Yep.
been like that for 100 years. Right? We've
Yep.
changed a bunch of
Yep.
different things. We've even changed superintendents, cool words to use. The cool word now we're using is science of reading and science of learning. Like, that's the thing, right? We changed a
Mm-hmm.
lot of things, but that demographic hierarchy remains in our school, even, right? And that's why I
Mm-hmm.
said this is happening on my watch. And
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes there are systems in place or things that are safeguards that are not in place that can lead to these things. And if we put things in place, they may remedy some of these things. Right? And so we said, hey, we got kids, some of our students who aren't reading as well, right, as some of our other folks. So I gave this example to the staff because it was a real life example that happened in our school the summer before we started having this conversation. So my school was mostly Latino kids, about 2/3, about 20% were students from Northeast Africa, particularly Eritrea and Ethiopia, and then there were
Mm-hmm.
some students from some students from South Asia and places. And so one of my Asian students was having some trouble reading, and his family said, hey, we want to hold him back. My team said, well, we're not sure. We want to give him some work during the summer. We want to try to give him some extra supports before we hold him back. I said, okay, this is during right at the end of the school, tail end of the school year, summer's beginning. So I said, good stuff. My reading specialist is going to go work with your student, your child, our student, for the summer, and just give extra reading support throughout the course of the summer, and we'll see where we are, and then we'll make a decision toward the end of the summer. Family said, okay, we're cool with that. So I said, all right, I'll be right back. I'm gonna run up to the book room, and then I said, well, you'll go home. I'll bring the books to the house. So I'm gonna run up to the book room and go get the books. Man, this kid, well, I won't say grade and stuff, but it took me over 40 minutes to find a book on that student's grade level with an Asian
Mm-hmm.
main character.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's on my watch. Like, this kid never saw himself represented in this book, been in my school for years, never saw himself represented in the stuff we do.
Mm-hmm.
And then we wonder why his groups of students aren't reading as well. Right. We can do different. We can do better than that. Right. So when
Yeah.
we brainstorm, well, what can we do just about that particular thing? Right. We talked about, oh man, we could audit our books. Right. And we
Yeah.
found there's an online website somebody shared with me, said, here's how you can audit the diversity of your books. Right. Easily.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff we can talk to the families, we can talk to the students about whether they feel that they are represented. Right. These are new practices we can put in place into our space. Right. Simple stuff. Not even examining the racist sort of white supremacist mindset that we might have, all of us. Right? Not even that
Mm-hmm.
stuff. But like, those are ways that we can begin to do the work, right? That is deconstructing those systems. And I share with the team that it is no longer okay for us, you, me, or you, to say we're here just because we love kids. It's not enough anymore. We
Mm-hmm.
need to do something different. And we know some stuff is broken. And we have to either believe it's been like this for a century plus. Right? So we have to
Right.
either believe it's more of one thing or another. It's either more the problem of the deficits in our students and their families,
Yep.
or it's more about the deficits in the system that keeps recreating these hierarchies. And I need y'all. For now, I spent the first 2/3 of my career trying to fix holes in kids and families. And I now need us, because I'm personally going to start focusing more on these systems. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you now, because that's where we're going. And if you don't want to go, I'm telling you early enough that you can hop in the transfer portal, so to speak, and go
Yeah.
find a space that fits your vision better. So that's really like been one of the things that I say to the folks. And I'll add
Mm-hmm.
one last thing. And I told
Please.
some of my team, because they said, well, what are you going to do? You're going to, like, people are going to call us racist if we start having these conversations. If we disagree, then we're racist. And then we're not doing the bifurcation thing, the fragility piece about like whether or not you're either racist or you're not. And now, you get through, if you say something wrong, you're getting thrown in the pile of, what did Hillary Clinton call them, the basket of deplorables or something. Like, we're
Horribles.
not
Yeah.
we're not doing that. We're family. So if you say something, know that even if you have an intent that is different than the impact, we're still going to recognize that impact, but we are not letting you go. We're going to hold hands and we're going to walk together. We're family. It's okay to make mistakes in these conversations, because we still going to keep growing together. Right. And we just going to say sorry, try to restore it, and keep moving forward. If you have, if you are genuinely trying to do this work, I got your back no matter what happens.
You know, it's one of the things that we found, continuing that same story, uh, was there was a tendency, I would say, of folks who were attempting to get into this anti-racist work to look at the disproportionate effect of our discipline, looking at, um, for example, the school that I served at that time was about 80% Hispanic. We had a huge Guatemalan population, a huge, um, just um, Latin population. Okay. Um, and then 13, roughly about 16% were black. What we found was that 16% accounted for upwards of 40 to 50% of all negative discipline referrals. How is it possible in this, and we were like a microcosm. It wasn't the biggest school. We didn't have a whole bunch of numbers of people. We had, grades 4 through 8. When you looked at the data, and you could literally see how a student walking in who looked like you and I would come out with such negativity by way of just going to school.
Mm-hmm.
When we began to do that type of work, then it started to get what I would call short circuited. Because either you are going to say, oh my goodness, we're guilty of this. How do we change? Or, but look at these behaviors, look at these things, and make excuses. Like you said, it's the fish's fault that it couldn't swim in the poison. It's
Mm-hmm.
the fish's fault that it couldn't deal with the toxins of its environment. It's the fish's fault, right? And here's the thing: in education, we will typically do this thing, and I think it's human nature. When things are great, when the story and the data says that we're doing an excellent job and we get educator of the year and all the things, we clap. It's great. Look at what we did. Look at how that came together. But when the data tells a different story, we will quickly point away from ourselves and say, look at where these students come from.
Mm-hmm.
I can't get this parent to come into a parent teacher conference. Um, there's limited resources. There's this, there's that. And we point away at all these things. And hear me, I'm not saying that those things aren't factors.
Mm-hmm.
But when the data tells you you're doing a great job, it's not a factor in terms of what that student had to overcome. So why is it
Mm-hmm.
such a factor when it comes to us improving our efforts, right? I find that we would rather live with the excuses than take responsibility for results. Has that been your experience? And you talk a lot about, right, an action plan in this book. We talk about learning, we talk about it from a bunch of different aspects. So could you speak to, let's say that you're coming in, you're looking at that data in that school that I served. What would be your advice in terms of how you can move that thing forward?
So generally speaking, I would talk to the building leadership around how can we create a protocol for root cause analysis in some of those spaces that gets at what's in control of the school. Because what folks will do is say what could happen is folks could say, like, they could use that equity detour, as in Paul Gorski's language, that cultural poverty piece, right? Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
just how things are with them. What do you
Mm-hmm.
expect, right? But
Mm-hmm.
now if we start to say, okay, kids poor, parents don't speak the language, whatever, list all those on the fishbone diagram, for example, and say, now, where are the other things that we could do, right? Now, that's
Yeah.
where we focus. Right?
Yeah.
What do we have control over? And here's an example where we can say, if we need professional learning around this piece, then we can do that. So
Right.
if we look at those referrals, they are mostly, I'm imagining, disrespect or insubordination.
Defiance,
Right, exactly.
disrespect.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
now we can talk about how we can remedy those things. So we're going to focus on personal relationship building, right? We're going to focus on strategic notice. We're going to focus on um, capturing data that indicate students' voice, students' perspectives about what they experience, and now
Mm-hmm.
we can act on those things. So that, I think, is the piece. And so for that professional learning, we can tie into that data, because now people can say, what are the 8 things? Let's say Research for Better Teaching has 8 practices folks can use for building personal relationships, positive relationships between adults and students. Because at the core, what we all seem to believe is, in order to change child behavior, we have to change adult behavior. However, what it sounds
Mm-hmm.
like we are saying, in order to change the child's negative behavior, we have to change the outside adult's behavior. Right? No, we also have to
Mm-hmm.
change the inside of the building adult's behavior. And that's what we
Mm-hmm.
can control. So I'm gonna
Yeah.
give you. We're gonna practice these 8 practices that Research for
Mm-hmm.
Better Teaching says should be around building positive relationships. We're gonna practice this strategic notice so that we point out 5, 8, 12 great things for every one time we give a correction in the student. Like we're going to practice quarterly gathering student data, student voice data, where they explain to us how they are feeling about what's going on in school.
Yeah.
So those are things we can do. And we're going to change the system that we have for office referrals. All right. So we're going to
Mm.
say, now, here are office managed behaviors, here are classroom managed behaviors. I need you to do these 3 things first before a kid gets an office referral.
Yeah.
So there are definitely opportunities for us to grow from this. And that's really what it is, right? The book says first thing is to educate yourself, right? Then cast a vision for where you want to go. And then third
Yeah.
is now we're setting professional learning to get there over the course of time.
Yeah. Yeah. The real piece to that transformational work that you speak of in this book is folks having a level of self-awareness when it comes to igniting that passion for learning and for growth. Now here's a danger, right? Is you and I'm probably doing my hand a little bit here because I'm gonna talk a little bit about this at Bond when we go. But you there's something that sparks outrage. Folks then want to ask questions to learn. After they learn, they want to form the book club. The book club then leads to a committee, a diversity committee, an equity committee. And if they're real serious, boy, it's going to be a task force.
Yeah.
We're going to get a task force.
Nice.
And then after the task force presents its findings, we allow the findings to collect dust until something else comes along and sparks outrage again. And we repeat this cycle.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at that cycle, I look at almost our addiction to learning about the thing rather than changing the thing. Right? So we love the book clubs. We'll get in there and we'll talk about Robin DiAngelo's work, and we'll get in there and we'll talk about Ijoma Alu's work. We'll get in there and we'll talk about Ibram X. Kendi. We'll get in there and we'll talk about Dr. Chris Emden. We'll get in there and we'll talk about my brother Daman Harris. We'll get in there and we'll talk about all these books and these works that people put out there. But when it comes time for us to take that thing we learned and actually apply it, actually change something, actually take responsibility for something, I find that therein is the biggest gap in our educational improvement process. It is akin to a student who comes into your classroom and they sit back and they're afraid of getting the answer wrong. And so you put them in different environments and you say, listen, you get it wrong. So what? We all get it wrong. Matter of fact, I'm going to celebrate the biggest mistake in here to create an environment conducive to we are going to make mistakes together. That's how we grow. But then those same teachers who want to establish that framework, that environment will turn right around when it comes to this and say, I won't act unless it's perfect. I'd rather learn about it and get the book club, but I'm not really going to do it. And so there's this repetitive nature of learning because learning is safe. So yeah, brother, I hear and I love that you don't stop there, right? It's not just no, it's not just say, it's do. Help us with the do part. Help us with that.
So I think there, I think about listening, when I was listening to it, it made a connection for me to Glenn Singleton and his folks' work
Yeah.
around the courageous conversations about
Courageous
race.
conversations. Yeah.
And they talk about that. They call that courageous conversations about race compass, and say that
Mm-hmm.
different people enter these conversations at from different vantage points. So there are some people when they hear this is the issue that we have to deal with, Some people
Yeah.
right away go with this is wrong and this is right, and that we got to do something, right? Some people, they are in their emotions and just say this makes me angry, man, or this makes me sad, or this makes me fearful.
Hmm.
And some
Hmm.
people enter this saying, I need more information, right? I need more data because when I hear this, I'm having cognitive dissonance, and I need more
Mm.
info to help me think through this more, to help me process more.
Mm.
And what can
Hmm.
happen sometimes, and some people enter it from a moral spot, I was saying right or wrong stuff. But what can happen sometimes is folks that enter from different places can sometimes feel like they're at odds while they're both
Yeah.
trying to think through the same issue. And so
Yeah.
sometimes it just we need to be aware that just because somebody is saying, "Hey, I need more information," that is not necessarily a way for them to obfuscate the the challenge
Hmm.
or the issue,
Hmm.
right? Or doing any work around it. So like there, we can give more information for folks. I'll give an example of something I shared with a group recently. I was working with a school district out west on the West Coast, and I shared a video that I've shared before of some babies in a 60 minutes video exercising some bias about what people who liked Cheerios versus people who like graham crackers because that's what they like, sort of thing. And
Hmm.
we were using this to explain that bias is just sort of hardwired into us, and it's not
Yeah.
necessarily a bad thing. It just is. But some people couldn't get past the babies. Like, I can't believe that babies do this. I need more information. Cool.
Mm.
So the next time I came out there with that school district, I shared with them an electronic resource page that had all the research or a lot of the research that professor had done. Because folks said, I
Yeah.
need the research. Here you go. Right. So now the argument's off the table. Now what we doing? Right. So
Yeah.
that what we need to do is, we can sort of placate to an extent some folks wants or needs, but we can
Yeah.
also build in mechanisms for accountability. And that's what the leadership is about. Right. Because when you are the leader, and the leader doesn't mean you're the principal, right? It could be, but
That's
leader is
good.
anybody who wants to exercise influence in that space.
Yeah.
So you were saying, if your group is saying, okay, I want to read this book, that leader is saying, that's cool. What are we going to do about it? Right. Like that's what we're doing. So that leader is going to say, yeah, that's cool. Now what? Here's a professional learning we're going to take. If I'm a teacher, I'm going to my admin and saying, hey, I'm ready to take the lead on some of this. Right. Here's what I want to do. If I'm a department chair or grade level leader or you name it, these folks are saying, hey, I want to do this work with my team.
Yeah.
Even if the rest of
Yeah.
us aren't doing it, I want to do this with my team. And if you are a new teacher who is saying, I need to do this, like this needs to change, you can tell your admin, your support staff there, I want to try it in my classroom. Right. If you're a
Yeah.
parent, same thing. PTA, PTO, parent meeting, you call it community meeting. We want to try some stuff. So
Yeah.
there's absolutely an appetite out there for folks that want to do something. Sometimes people just don't know what to do. That's the
Mm.
only tools that
Mm.
they have. So they need a leader to step in and say, here's some other options. And we're going to hold each other accountable for them. We're not just going to admire the problem, as some people say.
So, we we have been talking a little bit about just anti-racist work and pushing back on these systems that create these disparities. Um, and I want to transition us in a second here to obviously talk about the greater, not even greater, but just broader work of Bond Academy, Bond Project, all the things, right? So I want to talk to you more about that in just a second. But as we're leading to that, um, I think about folks who are hearing this conversation and they've been doing great work wherever they might be. And if they're similar to my story and story of so many others, they've been kind of the you know if I don't know if you remember this one year LeBron. LeBron got to the finals with the Cavaliers, and Kyrie got hurt, Kevin Love got hurt, and it was just LeBron and whoever was left. Right, it was LeBron and Anderson Varejao, and he's playing against. I think it was still the Warriors at that time because they met like a bunch of different times.
Yeah.
And LeBron almost single-handedly won a couple of those games to the point where it could have been a very different situation. But by the end of game 3 and game 4, you just saw LeBron look defeated, like tired, exhausted from putting so much on himself and trying to pull this thing out. And the reason I bring that up is sometimes in this work, teachers who or leaders who don't necessarily feel like it's their place or they have to defer will lean on the LeBron figure and say, take it home for us. And that person will go out in their passion and they'll go out and they'll try to try to bring the chip home. Bring some data, bring some action steps, do the thing, lead the equity team, do all the work of talking through points and what we can do and cast the vision, only to be exhausted at the end. And now they're hearing this podcast and they're like, listen, I did all of this and nobody's moving. I feel defeated. What can we say to those folks in that type of situation?
So, short version is we recognize the invisible tax that a lot of
Yeah.
us pay, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, that part is there for a lot of us.
For a
You
lot
are
of us, yeah.
only alone insofar as you choose to be. There are people
Hmm.
all over the country doing this work. So there are people who would love to connect with you and share problems of practice about this work. I was just talking to some brothers from Tennessee who just like, hey
Yeah.
man, like we trying to think through these headwinds that we encountering right now. Like let's talk together. Right? Like
Yeah.
that stuff that's there. The other part, I'm gonna stick with the or hit back with the LeBron analogy too. So a
Yeah.
part of what LeBron was doing was he was going all out to get them over that final hurdle. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's
Yeah.
that's game
That's good.
that's game 96, right,
Yeah.
of this season. The first
Mm-hmm.
82 games of the regular season, LeBron is focused on developing the capacity of his teammates.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's talking them through about what's the right pass to make and what do we do off the pick and roll. And like, so he's helping them strategize. He's pushing them. He's coaching them
Yeah.
for the regular season. And he's got enough that now he has enough left to help us get over that final hurdle.
Yeah.
So we're
Yeah.
not
Yeah. That's
saying
good, Doc.
that principals need to make sure that they are picking that one black teacher on the staff and lead all the equity training. Right. That ain't your job.
Yeah.
But it is your calling to make sure your babies in that neighborhood don't drown. Right. So that is us. And sometimes you are all they got.
Mm.
So you can't be tired right now. You gotta be tired later.
Mm.
Because these kids need you and it's life and death.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But while you are doing this, you can build the people around you. You can take time for self-care, right? Put that oxygen mask. My brother Daryl Howard says this with Bond all the time. Put the oxygen mask on
Nice.
yourself
Yeah.
first, right? You can
Yeah.
do that and still do the work. And in these times where people getting fired for even saying the word race, right? In some spaces, you got to be strategic. I'm not saying you got to say it. I'm gonna keep saying it, right? But I'm not saying you got to say it. I'll say it. You could call me in or tell me to call into the show you on, right? I'll say the word so you don't have to say it. I'll come out to your
Yeah.
district so you don't have to say it. But somebody's got to say it. It doesn't have to be you because we need you to stay in your job,
Yeah.
right? Your community
Yeah.
needs you. Don't get fired.
Yeah. So with that, brother, before we transition, you think about the current challenges we're still faced with in education. You think about teacher burnout, teacher retention, the teacher shortage crisis. You think about the political pressure that you rightly named, and the polarization. Right? If I say this, then oh my gosh, there's such backlash. Um, I think about I think about, I've said this before, but I think about watching, these animal documentaries. I really enjoy watching animal documentaries.
All right.
I'll, I'll I'll sit back and watch, how dolphins, work together, the clicking sounds they make. It just fascinates me, right? I watch all different things, but one of this documentary that I found that was really amazing was about meerkats. Meerkats are very interesting creatures because meerkats will forage on all fours. They're down, they're in the ground, they're doing all of the work, but their focus is low to the ground. But they always have a patriarch or a matriarch or some leader who will find a place above everybody else, away, a little bit away, just to stand up on their hind two legs and look over the horizon to ensure that everything is safe for the folks who are down on the ground doing the work. As someone who has put together a visionary work of what things can look like, as you're standing up on your hind two legs, if you will, to borrow from the analogy, what gives you hope, even in the times that we are experiencing today?
Oh man, that one's easy.
Yeah.
So the ASCD, I'm sure a lot of the family here knows ASCD. They have a Ghana
Hmm.
affiliate, right? It's called Ghana
Mm.
ASCD.
Yeah.
And every year, starting last year, but they have one, the second annual is this year, they have an international education summit. And they invite folks in the diaspora to come over and learn with some of our folks from back home in Accra and other places in Ghana, or other places in Africa.
Yeah.
So I was there last summer with some of us from Kenneth Smith and Daryl Howard from the Bond Project, and we were there talking about some of the different things that we do. And while we were there, we took a tour to one of the castles where the enslaved were, where the door of no return, where the enslaved were waiting for, waiting for the ships to come and that sort of thing.
Wow.
So there's a part of the floor there that has like petrified stone and stuff that's been covering the brick. So they did some power washings of sorts to clean off some of the brick, so you can see the brick and the underneath of the petrified rocks and stuff. And the tour guide said to us, the petrified rocks that you see, they aren't that's not rocks, that's not stone. That is petrified feces and menstrual blood and vomit, urine, all those things, because those folks, that our ancestors were in these rooms shoulder to shoulder for weeks at a time, right? Chained together. So there's nowhere to go. Food dropped through the top of the little dungeon area where they were, and it would fall down like without warning. Sometimes just fall down into the stuff, into the feces, into the urine, and this is, you either eat this or you die. Sometimes you eat this and you die. Right?
Mm.
And that is just to get them, wait for them to get on a boat to go to hell, right? Over here.
Mm.
And
Mm.
what the tour guide said to me, and I like it will stick with me forever, is this was one of the worst, if not the worst, situations in human history where one group
Yeah.
of humans did something to another group of humans. And your ancestors were the ones who survived.
Mm.
The cloth you are cut from is different, right? Like this, all this other stuff is temporary, man. Like you think about what our folks went through, like
Mm.
six generations ago, and look at us now, right?
Mm.
And we worried about these folks, like, they're concerned, right? Because they hold some levers of power. But yo, man, like our folks, we we've been through worse and came out stronger. Now,
Mm.
what I also share with folks is because it's not just black folks, like every group of people has that
Mm-hmm.
kind of story where they
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
overcame something catastrophic and survived. So we are all capable of doing this. Right?
Yeah.
So that for me, that's what gives me hope, because the arguments they're using against our conversations today were the same arguments, or very similar, that folks used to resist abolition. Right? Folks who were pro enslavement
Yeah.
use these same arguments. Folks who were
Yeah.
pro redlining use these same arguments. Right? So yeah, we're gonna be all right. We just got to keep
Yeah.
pushing, organize.
That's it. That's it. That's how I end every talk or every little clip is let's keep pushing. So I appreciate that reminder. Brother, listen, you are doing phenomenal work, and folks who maybe up here in the Northeast, or folks who may be hearing about you for the first time may not know about the greater work of Bond. Could you please direct folks to where they can touch base with you? Please plug the conference, because this is going to go up before that even comes, and join both of us there in April. But please plug all that stuff. Let folks know how they can get in touch with your genius.
Appreciate you. So if you're buying that book, it is The Anti-Racist School Leader. It's with Solution Tree. You can buy it wherever good books are sold. Um, if you are looking to get in touch with me, my name is on the screen. But if you're listening to this, it is Daman Harris, Daman. You can think about it as the man. I am the man. Harris. It's damonharris.com is the website. And the email address is damon@damonharris.com. And if you want to learn about the Bond Project, man, we do all kinds of great things. It is bondeducators.org. If you know somebody, a man of color in education, who wants to write something to get posted online, who wants to speak on the podcast, who wants to present at a conference, who wants to mentor his newer colleagues, who needs a mentor, like those are the things that we support brothers in doing. So if you have a need with a man of color in education, point them our way. Bondeducators.org. You can hit us on the email, or you can hit me on my email, Bond D. No, let's go with the Bond email, info@bondeducators.org. Sorry to give you my email. It may get confusing.
Yeah.
And the Bond Academy is our annual conference. It's one of our tentpole events. It's going to be at Bowie State University, the oldest Black HBCU in Maryland, in Bowie, Maryland, from April 25th through April 27th. It is an inexpensive conference with national presenters like your brother Bobby, my brother Bobby here. Folks from all over the country come and grow and learn together. Every session in the breakout session is led or co-led by a Black or brown man in education, but you don't have to be to attend. Everybody we want there. Everybody can grow from this perspective. You can Google Bond Academy 2025. That'll be the quickest way to get you the link to the registration page. And we'd love to see you there.
Please join us. When I tell you, for me, the first time going was transformational. Being able to connect with so many dope educators doing work, it was an encouragement to me. Um, I think we had good brother Jay Barnett come, and he was there. I think there was so many other folks who were sharing. I had a great time, and then I even connected with another conference as a result of of just being there. And so I say all that to say, thank you, brother. You are um, creating a beautiful tapestry of work that will outlive us. And I hope folks can appreciate that in its time. In addition, brother, I know, my grandmother and my aunt used to, weave and sew and create. And when I was young and I would sit by their feet and play with something, I would look up and it would look like a chaotic mess when I would look up at what they were weaving. But when they would sit me on their lap and show me, I began to see how all the colors and things wove together to create this beautiful landscape that they were creating. And it was only when I changed my perspective that I got to appreciate the beauty. And so I hope that folks will join us on this journey to creating a new normal by changing their perspective. Yeah, it seems bleak when we're down on the ground, but let's sit up on Big Mama's lap real quick, metaphorically speaking, and see the beautiful tapestry that is being created. And I thank you for that work that you're doing, brother, the work that you put out into the world. And even amidst all that we're facing, you continuing to keep pushing forward. I appreciate you, brother, and just want to honor you in this time we have together.
Sir, appreciate you, Bobby. It's good to talk to you, family.
Until next time, brother, let's keep pushing.